The gunshot echoed through the valley like thunder, silencing the songbirds as Sarah Porter clutched her swollen belly and ducked behind the weathered oak tree. It was April 1878, and the Arizona Territory wasn't kind to a woman alone, especially one 7 months pregnant and fleeing from her past. Mineral Park loomed in the distance, its dusty streets and wooden buildings shimmering like a mirage in the afternoon sun, her last hope for salvation in a world that had already taken too much. Sarah's boots crunched on the dry earth as she made her way toward town, her skirts stained with dust and her dark hair falling loose from its pins. The journey from St. Louis had depleted her meager savings and sapped her strength, but the memory of her husband's lifeless body sprawled on their bedroom floor, murdered by the very men who'd called themselves his business partners, drove her forward. They wanted the deed her husband had hidden, the papers proving ownership of a silver mine worth more than most men would see in 10 lifetimes. Her breath came in short gasps as the first buildings of Mineral Park appeared before her. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and the baby kicked furiously inside her, as if sensing its mother's distress. Sarah stumbled, her vision blurring, and just as her knees buckled beneath her, strong arms caught her, preventing her fall. "Whoa there, madam." The voice was deep, tinged with concern and the hint of a southern drawl. "Steady now." Sarah looked up into eyes the color of a summer sky, set in a face weathered by sun and wind. The man who'd caught her wore a dusty Stetson and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone familiar with hardship. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with thirst. "Name's Noah Yates, madam," he said, supporting her weight as he guided her toward the nearest building, a simple wooden structure with a sign declaring it Mineral Park General Store and Mercantile. "Looks like you could use some water and a place to sit a spell." Inside the store, Noah helped Sarah to a chair near the counter. The proprietor, an older man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his ledger with curiosity. "Mr. Fuller, this lady needs water," Noah said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Fuller nodded, fetching a tin cup and filling it from a barrel in the corner. Sarah accepted it gratefully, drinking deeply as Noah watched her with concerned eyes. "Where you headed, madam?" he asked once she'd finished. Sarah hesitated. Trust came at a premium in her world now. "I'm looking for work," she said finally, "and a place to stay until my baby comes." Noah's gaze dropped to her belly, his expression softening. "Not many folks hiring women in your condition around these parts, especially not strangers." "I can cook," Sarah said, desperation edging into her voice. "Clean. So, I'm willing to do whatever honest work is available." "Might be Mrs. Holloway at the boarding house needs help," Fuller interjected, replacing his spectacles. "Her arthritis has been acting up something fierce, and she mentioned needing someone to help with the cooking." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. "Where can I find her?" "End of Main Street," Fuller replied. "2-story white building with green shutters. Can't miss it." Sarah nodded her thanks and attempted to stand, but Noah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'll walk you there," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "Looks like you've had a long journey." Too exhausted to refuse, Sarah allowed Noah to escort her from the store. As they stepped onto the boardwalk, his hand under her elbow steadied her, and she found herself studying his profile. His jaw was strong beneath a few days' growth of beard, and his clothes, though dusty, were well kept. A gun hung at his hip, not unusual in these parts, but he wore it with the ease of someone who knew how to use it but preferred not to. "You're not from around here," Sarah observed, breaking the silence between them. Noah's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Texas originally. Been working cattle drives up and down the territory for the past few years. Just took a job with the Barrett Ranch outside of town." You're a cowboy, then? Yes, madam, though these days they call me foreman. There was a hint of pride in his voice. As they approached the boarding house, Sarah felt her steps falter. What if Mrs. Holloway turned her away? What if word had somehow reached this remote town about the men pursuing her? Noah seemed to sense her trepidation. Mrs. Holloway's a fair woman, he said quietly. Lost her husband in the war and raised 3 boys on her own. She'll understand your situation better than most. The boarding house was neat and well maintained, with a small garden out front and curtains in the windows. Noah knocked firmly on the door, which opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, her face lined but kind. "Noah Yates," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Didn't expect to see you until Saturday's supper." "Mrs. Holloway," Noah replied, removing his hat. "This is Miss Porter," Sarah supplied. "Sarah Porter." "Miss Porter is looking for work," Noah continued. "Mr. Fuller mentioned you might need help with the cooking and such." Mrs. Holloway's sharp eyes took in Sarah's condition, her travel-worn clothes and the absence of a wedding ring. Her lips tightened momentarily, but then she sighed. "Come in, then. We can talk inside." Sarah entered the cool dimness of the boarding house, the sense of beeswax and fresh bread welcoming her. Noah remained on the porch, his hat in his hands. "I'll leave you ladies to your discussion," he said. "Miss Porter, I hope to see you around town." With that, he replaced his hat and descended the steps, his tall figure soon disappearing around a corner. Sarah watched him go with an odd feeling of loss before turning back to Mrs. Holloway. The older woman gestured for her to sit at a table in what appeared to be a small dining room. "Now, let's be plain with each other. You're expecting no husband in sight and looking for work in a town where you know nobody. That about sum it up," Sarah swallowed hard. "Yes, madam." "Your husband dead or run off?" "Dead," Sarah whispered, the word catching in her throat. "Mrs. Holloway's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss. When's the baby due?" "2 months, give or take." The older woman was silent for a long moment, considering. "I can offer you room and board plus $2 a week to help with the cooking, cleaning, and serving meals to my boarders. It's not much, but you'll have a roof over your head and food in your belly after the baby comes." She trailed off, her implication clear. "I understand," Sarah said quickly. "I can make other arrangements by then." Mrs. Holloway nodded, seemingly satisfied. "You can start today. I've got 5 boarders at present, all men, all workers from town or the surrounding ranches. Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon for whoever's here, and supper at 6 in the evening. Sundays we serve a big dinner after church, but that's it for the day." Relief washed over Sarah. It wasn't much, but it was something, a chance to catch her breath and plan her next move. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I won't let you down." Mrs. Holloway's smile was brief but genuine. "Rooms upstairs, last door on the left. There's a pump out back for washing up. I'll expect you in the kitchen in an hour to help with supper." The weeks that followed fell into a predictable pattern. Sarah rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast, spent the morning cleaning rooms and doing laundry, and then assisted with dinner and supper. The work was hard, especially as her pregnancy progressed, but Mrs. Holloway was fair, if not overly warm. The boarders were polite, if curious about the new pregnant woman in their midst, and Sarah kept to herself, offering little information about her past. Noah Yates came to the boarding house every Saturday evening for supper, as was his custom before Mrs. Holloway had hired Sarah. He always greeted her with a tip of his hat and a kind word, sometimes lingering after the meal to help clear the table or fix something that needed repair around the house. Sarah found herself looking forward to these brief encounters, though she chided herself for the foolishness of it. One Saturday evening in late May, as Sarah was clearing the table after the other boarders had departed, Noah remained seated, watching her work. "You're looking tired, Miss Porter," he observed. Sarah paused, a stack of plates in her hands. "The work keeps me busy." "Too busy, I'd say. Should you be on your feet so much in your condition?" A faint blush colored her cheeks. Most men avoided any mention of her pregnancy as if it were somehow indecent to acknowledge. "The baby's healthy. Active, too," Noah smiled. "That's good to hear." He hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to ask, is there anyone I could contact for you? Family somewhere who might help when the time comes?" Sarah's hands tightened on the plates. "No, there's no one." Noah studied her face, his blue eyes discerning. "You're running from something or someone." It wasn't a question, and Sarah didn't bother denying it. Instead, she carried the dishes to the kitchen without responding. When she returned to wipe down the table, Noah was standing, hat in hand, ready to depart. "Miss Porter," he said, his voice low, "if you ever need help, you can come to me. I mean that." Before she could formulate a response, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah sat by her window, watching the stars and feeling the baby's restless movements. She thought of Noah Yates, his gentle manner, his quiet strength, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. In another life, in another time, she might have allowed herself to imagine possibilities. But her reality was stark. She was a widow with a child on the way and men who wanted her dead for a piece of paper she didn't even possess. There was no room in her life for the comfort of a man's arms, no matter how inviting they might seem. June arrived with blistering heat that made Sarah's ankles swell and her back ache constantly. Mrs. Holloway, noticing her discomfort, reduced her duties, though she made it clear this was a temporary accommodation. "Have you thought about what you'll do after?" the older woman asked one afternoon as they shelled peas on the back porch. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow. "I thought perhaps I could find work as a seamstress. I'm quite skilled with a needle." Mrs. Holloway nodded. "That's sensible. But what about the child?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "What about my child?" Sarah asked, her voice sharper than intended. Mrs. Holloway sighed. "Sarah, be practical. A single woman with a baby has few options in this world, especially out here. The orphanage in Prescott is clean and well run. The sisters would ensure your child is adopted by a good family, one that can provide what you cannot." Horror washed over Sarah, cold despite the heat of the day. "Give up my baby? Never." "It's not uncommon," Mrs. Holloway persisted gently. "Many young women in your situation make this choice. It's the kindest thing for the child, and it would allow you to start fresh." "My child is all I have left of my husband," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I would sooner die than abandon it." Mrs. Holloway's expression was pitying. "Think on it. That's all I ask. Life is hard enough for a woman alone. With a child, it becomes nearly impossible." The conversation haunted Sarah for days afterward. She noticed the way the townspeople looked at her now with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. Even the minister's wife, who had initially been kind, now kept her distance, as if Sarah's condition might somehow be contagious. Only Noah treated her the same, his Saturday visits continuing without fail. If anything, he seemed more attentive, often bringing small gifts, a jar of peach preserves, a length of soft blue ribbon, once even a carved wooden rocking horse that he claimed was just gathering dust in the ranch storeroom. On the first Saturday in July, nearly a month from her due date, Sarah was sweeping the porch when a carriage pulled up in front of the boarding house. Two men in city clothes descended, their manner businesslike as they approached. "We're looking for a Mrs. Sarah Porter," the taller of the two said, his voice carrying a hint of the East Coast in its cadence. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. How had they found her? "May I ask who's inquiring?" The man produced a card. "Ambrose Whitfield, attorney at law. My client has been searching for you regarding a matter of some importance." Sarah's mouth went dry. "I'm afraid you have the wrong person," she lied, backing toward the door. The second man stepped forward, his eyes cold. "I don't think so, Mrs. Porter. Or should I call you Mrs. Harrington? We know your husband was murdered, and we know what he took before his death." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah insisted, her voice shaking. "Please leave." "The deed, Mrs. Porter," the lawyer said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "My client is willing to be generous $500 for its return, enough for you to start a new life elsewhere, or perhaps even place your child with a good family." The implication made Sarah's blood run cold. "I don't have your deed," she said truthfully. "James never told me where he hid it." The second man's face hardened. "That's unfortunate for you, Mrs. Porter. Very unfortunate indeed." Before either man could say more, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Noah Yates dismounted from his horse in a fluid motion, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "Everything all right here, Miss Porter?" he asked, his hand resting casually near his holstered gun. The lawyer turned, assessing this new arrival with obvious disdain. "This is a private conversation, sir. I suggest you move along." Noah didn't budge. "Miss Porter looks like she'd prefer you gentlemen to be the ones moving along." The lawyer's companion stepped forward, his hand moving toward his coat, but Noah was faster. In one smooth motion, his gun was drawn and pointed steadily at the man's chest. "I wouldn't," Noah advised quietly. "Now, I believe the lady asked you to leave." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the lawyer nodded curtly to his companion and they returned to their carriage. "This isn't over, Mrs. Porter," the lawyer called as they drove away. "We'll be in town for a few days should you reconsider our offer." When they were out of sight, Noah holstered his weapon and turned to Sarah, who was trembling visibly. "You'd better come inside and tell me what that was all about." In the privacy of the boarding house kitchen, with Mrs. Holloway out visiting her sister, Sarah finally told Noah everything: her real name, her husband's murder, the missing deed, and her flight across half the country to escape the men who wanted it. "They killed James because he discovered they'd been swindling the other investors," she concluded, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea Noah had insisted on making. "He took the deed to prevent them from selling the mine, but he never told me where he hid it. I've looked everywhere I could think of." Noah was silent for a long moment, processing her story. "These men are dangerous," he said finally. "They've tracked you across the country. They won't stop until they get what they want or until they're convinced you don't have it. What can I do?" Sarah whispered, one hand protectively covering her belly. "I have nowhere else to go, no one to turn to." Noah's gaze was steady, his voice resolute. "You have me. I won't let them harm you or your child." The certainty in his voice brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "Why would you risk yourself for me? You barely know me." "I know enough," Noah replied simply. "I know you're brave and hardworking. I know you love your child fiercely before it's even born. And I know that no decent man could stand by and watch a woman in danger without offering help." Over the next few days, Noah arranged for one of the ranch hands to stay at the boarding house, ostensibly as a new boarder but in reality as protection for Sarah. He himself rode into town daily, keeping an eye on the lawyer and his companion, who had taken rooms at the hotel. Sarah continued her duties at the boarding house, but the atmosphere had changed. Mrs. Holloway, having overheard part of Sarah's story, was distant and concerned. Those men came back asking questions while you were at the mercantile yesterday, she informed Sarah as they prepared supper one evening. They wanted to know about your routine, your acquaintances in town. Sarah's hands stilled in the bread dough she was kneading. What did you tell them? Nothing useful, Mrs. Holloway assured her. But Sarah, this situation is becoming dangerous for everyone involved. Perhaps it would be best if you considered their offer. I told you, I don't have what they want, Sarah replied, frustration edging into her voice. Mrs. Holloway sighed. Then perhaps you should consider leaving Mineral Park, for your safety and that of your child. The suggestion stung, but Sarah understood the older woman's concerns. Where would I go? I have no money, no transportation, and I could go into labor any day. The orphanage in Prescott, no, Sarah interrupted firmly. I'm not giving up my baby. Mrs. Holloway's expression hardened slightly. Then I don't know how to help you, Sarah. I run a respectable establishment. I can't have dangerous men coming around, threatening my other boarders. The implication was clear. Sarah's time at the boarding house was limited, baby or no baby. That night, lying awake in her small room, Sarah felt the baby shift restlessly within her. Fear and uncertainty clawed at her, but beneath them was a fierce, protective love. She would not abandon her child, no matter what anyone said. Somehow she would find a way forward for both of them. A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Cautiously, she approached, calling out quietly, "Who is it?" "It's Noah, Miss Porter. May I speak with you? It's important." Confused but trusting, Sarah opened the door to find Noah standing in the hallway, his expression grave. "What's wrong?" she whispered. "Those men were at the saloon tonight, asking about hiring guns," he replied, keeping his voice low. "They're planning something. We need to get you somewhere safe." "Now, in the middle of the night," Noah nodded. "Pack whatever you can carry. I'll meet you downstairs in 10 minutes. As Noah slipped away, Sarah moved quickly, gathering her few possessions into a carpet bag. Her hands trembled as she changed into her sturdiest dress and boots, her mind racing. Where could they possibly go that would be safe? Downstairs, Noah was waiting by the back door, a rifle in one hand. He took her bag, his eyes softening as they landed on her swollen belly. "Can you ride?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. "I haven't in years and not in my condition." "We'll take it slow," Noah promised. "My horse can carry us both to the ranch. It's the safest place I know right now." Outside, Noah helped Sarah mount his horse, then swung up behind her, his arms encircling her to hold the reins. The sensation of his solid presence at her back was both alarming and oddly comforting. They rode in silence through the moonlit desert, the only sounds the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the occasional cry of a night bird. Sarah was acutely aware of Noah's breath against her hair, his chest warm against her back. Despite her fear, there was something undeniably safe about being in his embrace. The Barrett Ranch was dark and quiet when they arrived, the main house a looming shadow against the star-strewn sky. Noah led Sarah to a small cabin a short distance from the bunkhouse. "Foreman's quarters," he explained as he lit a lamp inside, illuminating a simple but tidy living space. "You'll be safe here. The men are loyal and they'll keep watch." Sarah glanced around at the sparse furnishings: a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and a bookshelf filled with worn volumes. "Where will you stay?" "Bunkhouse," Noah replied, setting her bag on the table. "I'll be close if you need anything." As he turned to leave, Sarah impulsively caught his arm. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know why you're doing all this for me, but I'm grateful." Noah's expression was unreadable in the lamplight. "Get some rest, Miss Porter. We'll figure out our next steps in the morning." But sleep eluded Sarah long after Noah had departed. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, her mind filled with unanswerable questions. How long could she impose on Noah's protection? What would happen when her baby arrived? And what of the men who pursued her? Would they ever give up their search? The baby kicked vigorously, as if sensing her distress. Sarah placed a hand on her belly, whispering, "We'll be all right, little one. Somehow we'll be all right." The next morning, Sarah awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of muted voices outside the cabin. She dressed quickly and stepped onto the small porch to find Noah in conversation with an older man whose weathered face and commanding presence marked him as someone of authority. Noah turned at her appearance, a smile warming his features. "Miss Porter, this is Mr. Barrett, owner of the ranch." "Mr. Barrett, Miss Sarah Porter." The rancher tipped his hat, his shrewd eyes taking in her condition. "Miss Porter, Noah's explained your situation. You're welcome to stay here as long as necessary." Sarah blinked in surprise. "That's very generous, Mr. Barrett." "I wouldn't want to impose, no imposition," Barrett interrupted gruffly. "Any friend of Noah's is welcome here. Besides, my wife will be pleased to have another woman around the place. She's been after me for years to hire a housekeeper to help her." Before Sarah could respond, a woman's voice called from the direction of the main house. "Thomas, is our guest awake?" A moment later, Mrs. Barrett appeared, a basket over one arm. She was a handsome woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "You must be Miss Porter. I've brought some breakfast and a few things you might need." She cast a critical eye at Sarah's dress. "And some of my daughter's old dresses that might be more comfortable in your condition." Overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness, Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you," she managed. "I don't know what to say." Mrs. Barrett patted her arm. "No need to say anything, dear. Now come have some breakfast. You're eating for two after all." As the days passed, Sarah found herself settling into life at the Barrett Ranch. Mrs. Barrett, whose first name was Alina, took Sarah under her wing, teaching her the running of the ranch house and treating her with a motherly kindness that Sarah, orphaned young, had rarely experienced. The ranch hands, taking their cue from Noah and the Barretts, were respectful and protective, tipping their hats when they encountered her and offering shy congratulations on her impending motherhood. None asked about her past or the circumstances of her presence among them, accepting Noah's explanation that she was a friend in need of help. Noah himself was a constant, steadying presence. During the day, he was busy with his duties as foreman, but evenings often found him on the porch of his cabin, which he had insisted Sarah continue to occupy while he stayed in the bunkhouse. They would sit together, watching the sunset and talking of inconsequential things, books they had read, places they had seen, dreams they had harbored in younger days. Gradually, Sarah found herself sharing more of her past, her childhood in Ohio, her marriage at 18 to James Harrington, a man 15 years her senior who had seemed sophisticated and worldly to a small-town girl. Their life in St. Louis had been comfortable but lonely, with James often away on business and few friends to fill her days. "I didn't realize until after his death how little I truly knew him," she confessed one evening, her hands resting on her belly, which seemed to grow larger by the day. "He kept his business dealings private, said it was to protect me. I sometimes wonder if he suspected what might happen." Noah was silent for a moment, whittling a small piece of wood as he often did during their conversations. "Did you love him?" he asked finally, his eyes on his work. The question startled Sarah. "Yes," she said, then hesitated. "Though perhaps not in the way I imagined love should be. We were comfortable together. He was kind to me in his way." She paused, considering. "I think I was more of a pretty possession to him than a true partner." something to display at dinner parties and then tuck away in a fine house while he conducted his real life elsewhere. Noah looked up at that, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. That's not love, Sarah. That's ownership. The use of her given name, rare from his lips, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. Perhaps, she acknowledged, but it's the only kind I've known. Noah's gaze held hers for a long moment before returning to his carving. You deserve better, he said quietly. You and your child both. As July gave way to August, Sarah's time grew near. Eleanor Barrett, who had assisted at many births on the ranch, assured her that everything appeared normal, but Sarah couldn't help the fear that gripped her at the thought of bringing her child into such an uncertain world. What will I do after? She asked Eleanor one afternoon as they sat shelling beans on the porch of the main house. I can't impose on your kindness forever. Eleanor's hands never stopped their rhythmic work. You're not imposing, Sarah. Thomas and I are glad to have you here. Lord knows I can use the help with the house, especially with fall roundup coming. As for after, she hesitated. Have you considered what Noah might have to say about that? Sarah looked up sharply. What do you mean? Eleanor's smile was knowing. I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, and the way you look at him, for that matter. Heat rose in Sarah's cheeks. Noah has been kind to me, nothing more. If you believe that, you're not as observant as I thought, Eleanor replied, her tone gentle but firm. That man is halfway in love with you already, and your child too, I'd wager. Sarah shook her head, unable to allow herself to contemplate such a possibility. Even if that were true, which I doubt, there are complications. The men who are after me won't simply give up. I won't bring danger to Noah's doorstep. Noah's a grown man who can make his own decisions about what risks are worth taking, Eleanor pointed out. And from what I've seen, he's decided you're worth the risk. Before Sarah could formulate a response, a shout from one of the ranch hands interrupted them. Riders coming. 4 men armed. Thomas Barrett emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, as Noah appeared from the direction of the corral, similarly armed. Several of the ranch hands dropped what they were doing, moving to defensive positions around the main house. Get inside, Noah called to Sarah, his voice tight with urgency. Now, Eleanor helped Sarah to her feet, ushering her into the house as the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Through the window, Sarah watched as 4 horsemen approached the lawyer Whitfield, his companion from town, and 2 rough-looking men who could only be the hired guns Noah had warned about. The men reined in their horses at the sight of the armed ranchers, clearly not having expected such a reception. Words were exchanged that Sarah couldn't hear, but the tension was palpable even from inside the house. Suddenly, one of the hired guns made a move toward his holster. A shot rang out not from the gun but from Noah's rifle, the bullet kicking up dust at the horse's feet. Next one won't miss, Noah's voice carried clearly. State your business or ride out. Whitfield raised his hands in a placating gesture. We're looking for Mrs. Sarah Harrington, also known as Porter. We have reason to believe she's here. No one by that name on this ranch, Thomas Barrett replied, his voice carrying the weight of his authority as owner. I suggest you men turn around and head back to town. We know she's here, Whitfield's companion called, his tone belligerent. We followed your foreman when he took her from the boarding house. I don't care what you think you know, Barrett responded. This is private property and you're trespassing. I'm giving you one chance to leave peacefully. The standoff continued for several tense moments, neither side willing to back down. Sarah watched, her heart hammering in her chest as Noah stood his ground, rifle aimed steadily at the intruders. Finally, Whitfield spoke to his companions, and reluctantly they turned their horses. This isn't over, he called back. That deed belongs to my client and he wants it. Things will go badly for anyone harboring the woman. Only when the riders were well out of sight did the ranchers lower their weapons. Sarah sagged against the window frame, relief and terror warring within her. Those men knew where she was now. They would be back, perhaps with more men next time. Noah entered the house, his face grim. "They'll try again," he said, confirming her fears. "Next time they won't announce themselves so politely." "I can't stay here," Sarah whispered, one hand pressed to her belly where the baby kicked furiously, as if sensing her distress. "I've brought danger to all of you." Noah crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Sarah. You're not going anywhere, especially not in your condition. We'll increase the watches, send word to the marshal in Prescott if we need to, but I won't let you face those men alone." "Why?" Sarah demanded, tears stinging her eyes. "Why risk yourself and everyone here for me?" Noah's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Because I care about what happens to you, to both of you." His hand moved to rest lightly on her belly, the gesture so intimate that Sarah caught her breath. "Noah," she began, but was interrupted by a sharp pain that made her gasp and clutch at her abdomen. Alarm flashed across Noah's face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "The baby," she managed between clenched teeth as another pain seized her. "I think it's coming." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and fear. Alina Barrett took charge, transforming Noah's cabin into a makeshift birthing room with efficiency born of experience. Noah paced outside, deaf to Thomas Barrett's suggestions that he get some rest, his face drawn with worry each time Sarah's cries reached him through the cabin walls. As dawn broke over the desert, a new cry joined the world, the lusty wail of a healthy baby girl. Inside the cabin, Sarah lay exhausted but triumphant as Alina placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "She's perfect," Alina pronounced, wiping her hands on a towel. "Strong lungs, good color." "You did well, Sarah." Sarah gazed down at her daughter's tiny face, love overwhelming her in a wave so powerful it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mama." A soft knock at the door preceded Noah's anxious voice. "Is everything all right? Can I come in?" Alina chuckled, moving to open the door. "Come meet the newest member of the ranch, Noah." Noah entered hesitantly, his hat in his hands, his eyes immediately finding Sarah and the bundle in her arms. The expression that crossed his face was one Sarah would remember for the rest of her days, wonder mixed with tenderness and something deeper that made her heart skip a beat. "A girl," Sarah said softly as he approached. "Healthy and strong." Noah knelt beside the bed, his voice hushed with awe. "She's beautiful, just like her mother." Alina quietly excused herself, leaving the 3 of them alone in the golden morning light that streamed through the cabin window. "Would you like to hold her?" Sarah offered, surprising herself with the impulse to share this moment with him. Noah looked startled, then nervous. "I don't know how. I've never here," Sarah guided him, placing the tiny bundle in his strong arms. "Support her head. That's it." Noah cradled the infant with a gentleness that belied his strength, his face softening as she yawned and blinked up at him with unfocused eyes. "Hello, little lady," he murmured. "Welcome to the world." The sight of this tall, rugged cowboy holding her newborn daughter with such tender care brought a fresh wave of emotion to Sarah's exhausted heart. In that moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future she had scarcely dared to consider, one where she and her daughter were not alone, where they were protected and cherished by this man who had already risked so much for them. "Have you thought of a name?" Noah asked, reluctantly returning the baby to her arms. Sarah nodded. "Elizabeth, after my mother. Elizabeth James Porter, to honor her father as well." "It's a fine name," Noah approved. "Strong like she'll be." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the baby's soft noises. Finally, Noah spoke, his voice hesitant. "Sarah, I know this might not be the right time with everything that's happened, but I need to say something." Sarah looked up, something in his tone making her pulse quicken. "When I first saw you stumbling into town, I felt something I can't rightly explain," Noah continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "A need to protect you, yes, but more than that. As I've come to know you these past months, your courage, your determination, the way you faced every challenge without breaking, that feeling has only grown stronger." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm not a wealthy man. I have my position here, some savings, a small piece of land up north I've been thinking of developing someday. But I can promise you this. If you and Elizabeth stayed, if you'd consider a future here, I'd spend every day making sure you both were safe and cared for." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "Noah, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Sarah Porter," Noah said simply, the words hanging in the air between them. "I love you, and I already love this little girl as if she were my own. I'm saying I want to be a family, the three of us, if you'll have me." Tears filled Sarah's eyes, blurring her vision. "But the danger, those men, we'll face it together," Noah insisted, taking her free hand in his. "I've already sent a man to Prescott with a message for the marshal, explaining the situation. And Thomas has agreed to sign on extra hands for protection until this is resolved. We don't have to let fear dictate our lives, Sarah." Elizabeth made a small, contented sound against Sarah's chest, as if adding her own opinion to the discussion. Sarah looked down at her daughter, then back at Noah, this man who had shown her what true strength and gentleness could look like when combined in one heart. "I never expected to find love again," she said softly. "Especially not here, not now, but Noah, I do love you. You've shown me what it means to be truly cared for, to be seen and valued for who I am." Noah's face lit with hope. "Then you'll stay. You'll marry me." Sarah smiled through her tears. "Yes, to both." Noah's kiss was gentle, mindful of her exhaustion and the baby between them, but it held a promise that made Sarah's heart soar with possibilities. The danger had not passed, the men who pursued her were still out there, and the missing deed remained a mystery, but for the first time since James's murder, Sarah felt hope overtaking fear. With Noah at her side and Elizabeth in her arms, she could face whatever came next. 2 days after Elizabeth's birth, Sarah was resting in the cabin when a commotion outside drew her attention. Carefully placing the sleeping baby in the makeshift cradle Noah had constructed, she moved to the window to see several horsemen approaching the ranch, but these wore badges that glinted in the afternoon sun. Noah met the riders, exchanging words before leading them toward the main house. Curious and concerned, Sarah wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and after ensuring Elizabeth still slept soundly, made her way cautiously across the yard. In the Barrett's parlor, she found Noah, the Barretts, and 3 men, the marshal from Prescott and 2 deputies, from the looks of their badges. "Miss Porter," Noah said as she entered, moving to her side protectively. "Marshal Thornton has news that concerns you." The marshal, a tall man with a graying mustache and shrewd eyes, nodded to her. "Mrs. Harrington, or Porter, as you're known here, I've received information about the men who have been pursuing you." Sarah's hand found Noah's, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Have you arrested them?" "Not yet, but we will," Thornton assured her. "They've returned to Prescott, likely to gather more men, but that's not why I'm here." He reached into his coat pocket, withdrawing an envelope. "This arrived for me from St. Louis yesterday in response to the telegram your Mr. Yates sent." Sarah took the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter from James's former law partner, explaining that shortly before his death, James had filed the missing deed with the county clerk's office in St. Louis, simultaneously sending copies and affidavits to several trusted associates. He had suspected foul play and had taken precautions to ensure the truth would emerge even if something happened to him. The men who murdered your husband are already being pursued by authorities in Missouri, the marshal explained. The deed is legally registered and secure. There's nothing for them to gain by harming you now, though we'll still apprehend them for the threats they've made here. Relief washed over Sarah so intensely that her knees weakened. Noah's arm encircled her waist, supporting her. "It's over," she whispered. "Truly over." "It appears so," the marshal confirmed. "You're the legal owner of your husband's share in that silver mine, Mrs. Harrington. According to this letter, it's quite valuable. You and your child will never want for anything." The news was overwhelming. After months of running, of fear, of poverty and uncertainty, to learn that not only was she safe but wealthy as well, it seemed too much to comprehend. "Thank you, Marshal," Noah said, seeing Sarah's stunned silence. "We appreciate you bringing this news in person." After the lawman departed, promising to return once the would-be attackers were apprehended, Sarah sat in the Barrett's parlor, the letter clutched in her hands. "This changes everything," she said softly to Noah, who had not left her side. "The mine, the money, I never expected any of it." Noah's expression was carefully neutral. "Does it change your answer to my question?" Sarah looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "You're a wealthy woman now," Noah said, his voice steady though his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. "You could go anywhere, do anything. You don't need a cowboy's protection anymore." Understanding dawned, and with it a surge of love so strong it took her breath away. Sarah reached for his hand, holding it firmly in both of hers. "Noah Yates, if you think for one moment that my feelings for you have anything to do with protection or necessity, then you don't know me at all." Hope flickered in his blue eyes. "Sarah, I love you," she said firmly. "I loved you before I knew about this money, and I'll love you long after it's spent or invested or whatever we decide to do with it." "Yes," I said we. "Because the future I want, the only future I can imagine wanting, is one where you, me, and Elizabeth are together." Noah's smile was like sunrise breaking over the desert slow, then all at once brilliant. "In that case," he said, bringing her hand to his lips, "I believe we have a wedding to plan." They were married 2 weeks later in the Barrett's parlor, with Thomas serving as witness and Alina holding Elizabeth during the simple ceremony. The marshal returned as promised, bearing news that the men who had pursued Sarah were in custody, awaiting extradition to Missouri to face charges for James's murder. In the years that followed, Sarah and Noah built a life together that exceeded any dreams either had dared to harbor. With part of Sarah's inheritance, they purchased the land Noah had spoken of, a beautiful stretch of fertile valley nestled between mountains, with a creek running through it that reminded Sarah of the Ohio of her childhood. They built a comfortable home, large enough for their growing family, for Elizabeth was joined by a brother, Thomas, 2 years later, and then by twin girls, Catherine and Margaret, the following year. Noah proved to be as natural and loving a father as Sarah had glimpsed in those first moments he'd held Elizabeth, treating all the children as his own without distinction. The rest of the inheritance was wisely invested, providing security for their family while allowing them to help others in need. Sarah established a fund to assist widows and orphans in the territory, remembering all too well the vulnerability she had experienced. On a warm summer evening in 1885, 7 years after Elizabeth's birth, Sarah sat on the porch of their home, watching Noah teaching their oldest daughter to ride her own pony in the paddock nearby. The little girl's laughter carried on the breeze as Noah led the gentle animal in a circle, his patience evident in every movement. Elizabeth's dark hair, so like Sarah's own, caught the golden light of the setting sun as she bounced in the saddle, her father's steady hand never far from her back. Though she had James's blood in her veins, in every way that mattered, she was Noah's daughter from her love of horses to the determined set of her jaw when faced with a challenge. Sarah's hand absently stroked her rounded belly, where their fifth child grew stronger each day. The doctor in town had pronounced it her easiest pregnancy yet, with the baby due come autumn. As if sensing her gaze, Noah looked up, his smile as warm and reassuring as it had been on that first day in Mineral Park when he'd caught her as she stumbled. He said something to Elizabeth, who nodded eagerly, and then he made his way toward the porch, leaving their daughter practicing her posture under the watchful eye of the ranch hand who served as both foreman and honorary uncle to the Yates children. "How are my girls?" Noah asked, settling beside Sarah on the porch swing, one arm sliding naturally around her shoulders. "We're fine," Sarah replied, leaning into his embrace. "Just enjoying the view." Noah's gaze traveled over their property, the sturdy barn, the corrals filled with horses, the fields where cattle grazed, and the distant mountains painted purple by the setting sun. "It's a good life, isn't it?" he said, a note of wonder still present in his voice even after all these years. Sarah followed his gaze, but her thoughts were on the journey that had brought them here, the fear and loss, the courage and hope, the love that had sustained them through it all. "The best life," she agreed, turning to meet his eyes. "Though I never could have imagined it that day in Mineral Park when everyone was telling me to forget my baby and start over." Noah's hand covered hers where it rested on her belly. "I remember what I told you then, and I meant every word, not while I've got arms to hold you both." "And you've held us ever since," Sarah said softly. "Through everything." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Sarah thought of all the sunsets they had shared and all those yet to come. The road had not always been easy, but with Noah's arms around her and their children's laughter filling their home, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the distance, Elizabeth called for them to watch as she guided her pony in a small circle on her own, her face alight with pride and achievement. Noah and Sarah rose together from the swing, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture as natural as breathing, supporting her as they moved to the railing to cheer their daughter's accomplishment. "She's fearless, just like her mother," Noah observed, pride evident in his voice. Sarah smiled, leaning into his solid strength. "And kind-hearted, just like her father." As twilight settled over the land they had made their own, Sarah offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the courage to keep her child against all advice, for the cowboy who had stood by her when she had nothing to offer but trouble, and for the love that had transformed her darkest hour into the brightest of days. And as the first star appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky, Noah's arms tightened around her, a promise kept and renewed with each passing day to hold her, to cherish her, to walk beside her through whatever life might bring. Not just while he had arms to hold her, but forever.